you so much to the Prince of Wales Country Club for inviting us to tell our story. There are so many people, so many of our friends in the audience that have supported us and really made this expedition possible. And a very special thank you to Blanca and Philip Borden for all your help and support. You'll see a few photos of Philip pop up as we go through. So in 2022, we found ourselves standing on the edge of the Antarctic continent, about to attempt to break the record for the longest unsupported polar expedition in history and the longest unsupported crossing of the Antarctic continent. It's this story that we're going to share with you this evening. Adventure for me is freedom. I grew up on the west coast of Scotland, on the Isle of Mull. It's wild and beautiful, and the winters can be extreme. The year I was born, the sea ice froze in the bay outside our house. And when I was growing up, I always vividly remember wondering what it's like to stand on the frozen ocean, to just be alone on the immensity of a polar ice sheet. That's really stayed with me my whole life, and I think that adventure is entering the unknown. It's reconnecting with the natural world. So to tell this story properly, we have to go right back to the beginning, and my mum said that I had to put this photograph in the presentation. So this is me, aged 5 or 6, I think, the same age as my son Arthur is now. And I remember from a very early age, I wanted to explore. I wanted to be Jacques Cousteau in the South Pacific. I wanted to be Thesiger staring down lions in Africa. But most of all, I wanted to be Scott. I wanted to be Shackleton sailing south in a quest for the South Pole. I started off by reading those small little kids' Penguin Classic books about the famous explorers, and it was really from a very early age that spark was lit. And through my time at medical school, I found this amazing connection between medicine and adventure. I've had the opportunity to be an expedition doctor all over the world. This is with the Mudmen of Goroka in Papua New Guinea. And it's been something that I've strived towards my whole life. So growing up, I was always a rugby player. I never really had time for big endurance events. But when my medical career got very busy, I put my rugby boots aside and took up ultra-marathon running. It was at this stage that I thought, I have to start now working towards becoming an explorer and becoming someone that's capable of going on polar expeditions. So I thought there's nothing better than a 7-day ultra-marathon through the Atacama Desert that, you really find out what your character is in these races. And this is where I really learned how to become an endurance athlete. And then in 2012, I was putting a team together to go on an expedition to the North Pole. And I was having a whinge on the phone to my sister that I couldn't find anyone to go with. Finding teammates for polar expeditions is actually very difficult. And the man standing next to me in this photo is Dr. Richard Stevenson. And my sister had been seeing this guy for not too long, and he was eavesdropping on the conversation. And afterwards, he put his hand up and said, I'll come. And from that point on, almost 15 years ago now, we have been going on expeditions and adventures all over the world. So Richard is my teammate, my brother-in-law, and it really makes it a very nice family connection throughout all our adventures. And so we'd been on a couple of expeditions, and then we planned to cross Iceland in 2019. We planned to ski and climb across the Vatnajökull glacier to find the source of the Skjaldfanderflot River high in the Icelandic highlands and paddle it all the way down to the Arctic Ocean, something that's never been done before. A short expedition by Antarctic standards, around 3 weeks, but very hard, very technically complex, very dangerous, and it gave us the set of skills that we needed to be able to make decisions in difficult circumstances. And so once we had completed the Iceland expedition, we felt that we were ready to take on the challenge of Antarctica. So crossing Antarctica had been something that both Richard and I had wanted to do since we were children. And this is the expedition that we planned. So basically we would start on the very edge of the continent where the sea meets the ice, on the shores of Berkner Island. We would ski across Berkner Island to the Ronny Filchner ice shelf, cross the ice shelf, pass through the Pensacola Mountains to the Polar Plateau en route to the South Pole. From the South Pole, we would then turn to the Ross Ice Shelf at the end of our journey. That's a planned journey of 2,023 kilometers. And I know what you're thinking. It doesn't look that hard. But if we put it into context, so it's unsupported, so you have no help. It's just the two of us. You have everything you need to survive in your sleds for 2.5 months. All your food and fuel and safety gear. There's no resupplies, there's no dogs, there's no vehicles. It's just you and your best mate standing next to you. The air temperature around you is -40, which means if you blink for too long, your eyes will freeze shut. There's always a headwind coming off the South Pole, always a very strong wind in your face. And it's all uphill to the South Pole. So you go from sea level to 3,000 meters, essentially, at the South Pole. And there are crevasses, these huge holes in the ice, some of them big enough to swallow a cathedral. And they're hiding under a thin layer of snow, so you don't know where they are. They're just waiting there to swallow you up, never to be seen again. And it's kind of around this sort of point people start asking why. Why would you do this? And 3 very, very clear reasons. So the opportunity to push the boundaries, to achieve something that people haven't been able to achieve before, to bring back critical climate and meteorological data from Antarctica, and to inspire a generation of young people to become the custodians of Antarctica into the future. And this, the gentleman in the left-hand corner of the screen, is the great Sir Ernest Shackleton. And he was the first man to conceive of a crossing of Antarctica. After Amundsen and Scott had raced to the South Pole, Shackleton said that the crossing of Antarctica is the last great adventure in South Polar exploration. And the eagle-eyed amongst you will see that this photograph is actually upside down. But I put it in like that because it's orientated the way our journey was orientated. And so this is a dinner party sketch that Shackleton did himself early in 1914, a couple of months before the outbreak of the First World War. And it essentially shows his planned route. So they were planning to sail in from South America down into the Weddell Sea and make a base on the edge of the continent in the Weddell Sea. And Shackleton's party would then make their way to the South Pole. At the same time, a second team would be sailing from New Zealand to the Ross Ice Shelf. Once they reached the Ross Ice Shelf, the plan was for that team to make their way to the South Pole, leaving depots for Shackleton and his team. So once they reached the South Pole, they would then continue on to the Ross Ice Shelf, picking up these depots of food. But as the great story goes, and many of you will know, Shackleton's ship, the Endurance, was held fast in the ice in the Weddell Sea and lost, and sunk in the Weddell Sea. And they never made it to the Antarctic continent. It has become one of the greatest stories of leadership and endurance in human history. And it was this journey that inspired us, and it was this journey that we were trying to complete. Since 2013, when we skied together to the magnetic North Pole, this has been our big goal. Our friendship is based on trust and respect, and it forms the basis of our team. We need to be strong enough and endurance fit enough to drag a 200 kilo sled 10 hours a day. Rich and I are passionate adventurers, but first and foremost we're doctors. So we put the expedition to one side to put all our time and focus to our patients and our colleagues and our families through what's been a very challenging period. We have the opportunity to achieve something that no one has ever achieved before, to push the boundaries of what's possible, to inspire a generation of young adventurers to chase what they're most passionate about, and through hard work, determination, resilience, they can achieve whatever they set out to. So our team worked with Scouts Australia and Scouts New Zealand and the global scouting network to bring as many scouts along on this journey with us. Scouting is an incredible organisation that encompasses children from all backgrounds and gives them opportunities to experience things that they wouldn't normally experience. So we travelled all over Australia and New Zealand running expedition courses, taking kids camping and teaching them about Antarctica and about expeditions. And it's something that we continue to do today. And we set up the expedition so they would be able to follow us in real time as we progress through the expedition. And the other element to our expedition was the scientific element. Sir Ernest Shackleton said that superhuman effort isn't worth a damn unless it achieves results. So we teamed up with the Australian Antarctic Programme to develop a scientific program where we would collect climate and meteorological data around the clock, 24 hours a day for 66 days. And in doing so, we turned our sleds essentially into mobile weather stations. And it allowed us to build weather maps of a very, very remote and untraveled part of Antarctica and make a contribution to our knowledge and the conservation of Antarctica into the future. So it's all very well having these grand plans, these scientific programs and education programs and things, but unless you're fit enough to pull your sled when you get to the start line, all 160 kilos of it, then you're never going to get anywhere right from the start. So we spent almost 3 years dragging tyres up and down beaches for hours and hours on end, and dragging heavy things up beaches is by far the best form of training. The previous photo was taken from South Wales. This one is Sydney. You can see the kids up in the corner of the screen. They normally get roped into most things. But a journey like this is 80% mental, 20% physical. Once you're fit enough and strong enough to get to the start line, the only thing that matters after that is your mental capacity, your capability to endure, your capability just to get out of the tent every day in strong headwinds and minus 40 degrees. You're cold and you're hungry. And it's your mental attitude to that challenge that makes all the difference. And so we spent years and years on expeditions and training to get ourselves in the right headspace. And so our journey really began in Punta Arenas, where we made the final preparations for the journey. So we can see here is over 300 individually wrapped food packets. Again, I have to say a big thank you to Philip Borden for his contribution to the packing of the food. You can see Andrea up there. Andrea is also a clinical dietitian, so she was in charge of putting together all our meals. We had to eat 6,000 calories a day. That's about 15 Big Macs. But it had to be balanced. It had to be a balanced diet of proteins and carbohydrates and macro and micronutrients to keep us in one piece for for such a long time. These are the final bits of kit preparation before we fly into Antarctica. So putting our skins on our skis, all our food bags. You can see it, the green bags at the bottom of the screen, and that's me putting together our medical kit, and getting 2 doctors to decide what goes in a medical kit for 3 months is actually quite difficult. And so this is where we hit our first major hurdle. So we had 75 days to travel 2,000 kilometers, which is possible, but it's right on the edge. It's just enough time. And 75 days is a critical number because on day 75, everyone ships out of Antarctica. All the search and rescue teams, all the logistics teams, the only people that are left are the overwintering scientists. So we couldn't extend our expedition in any way. So day 75, we were going to have to ship out. And the problem came that we couldn't fly into Antarctica for almost 2 weeks because of storms, heavy snowfall. They couldn't clear the runway. So our 75 days got cut down to 66. Again, not impossible, but it just makes the challenge that much harder. That, those extra couple of kilometers that you have to cover every day, it really makes a massive difference. But then we made it. So we made it into Antarctica, into Union Glacier, which sits at the base of a mountain range, and it's here that we made our final preparations before heading out onto the ice. And so then we flew in a light aircraft from Union Glacier to the edge of Berkner Island. And to make it a true crossing, it's exactly where the ocean meets the continent. We started at an emperor penguin colony, and then got dropped off at our starting point. So that's a World War II battler aircraft that's specially modified for the polar regions. And when the plane leaves, when that plane left, we were probably the most isolated people on the planet. And it's about this point where when you start thinking whether this was a particularly good idea. And you can see our 4 sleds there. So we took 2 sleds each. So 2 of those sleds added up to 160 kilos. We took 2 sleds each because the coastal snow, and the snow as you go through the mountains, is always very soft and very deep. And so by spreading out the surface area of the weight, it helped keep the sleds up off out of the snow. Here we are on the coast of Berkner Island, on the edge of Antarctica, at our true coastal start. And if you look out over here, out to sea, there's the icebergs of the Weddell Sea. And we are going 2,000 kilometers in that direction. Exciting times. So this was an emotional moment for us. It's a moment that we had been thinking about since we were children, that we had been planning for solidly for 3 years. And we could turn from that point and look out across the Weddell Sea. And it just brought back all those thoughts of all the great people that had been before us, that stood on that spot. And only a couple of days before, actually, they had found Shackleton's ship in the Weddell Sea, not far from where we were standing. And so for the first day on Berkner Island, we had perfect weather. No wind, -10, sunny. It was quite remarkable, and we actually wondered what all the fuss was about. And then on day 2, we got treated to some proper Antarctic. So it's the end of day 2. We've just made camp. It's been a very, very difficult day. Real change in the weather. Soft drifting snow and slightly uphill and heavy fogs has made it really difficult. So we've only done 10 kilometers. It's only the start of the trip, so that's all we need to be doing. So we're hoping that the wind might drop off a little bit tomorrow, but it's very cold. It's about -18, and then strong winds, probably about 30 knots. But this is our view at the moment. That's our camp. And that's what we can see. So hoping for a good day tomorrow. So these whiteout days were by far the hardest. We were on the ice in Antarctica for around about 10 weeks, and these days would set in for 5, 7, sometimes even 10 days. And psychologically, they're very difficult. You basically it's like trekking through a cloud. There's no contrast between sky and snow. There's no points on the horizon to aim for. You will spend 10 hours literally in your own head. And we would open up the tent in the mornings and we'd look outside and we would just pray that there was something. There was some feature, some cloud, something to aim for. So these days were most definitely the hardest. Our daily schedule was to get up at 6 a.m. From 6 till 8, we would eat breakfast and break down camp. We'd be on our skis by 8. And we'd ski all the way through till 6 p.m. in hour and a half blocks. So we'd ski for an hour and a half. We'd have a 10 to 15 minute break. And then we'd do that all day until 6 p.m., at which point we would put the tent up, we'd get inside, we'd have a recovery drink just to get some fuel back in to recover from the arduous day outside. We would make dinner, and then we would do any kit repairs, we'd write in our journals, we'd make any phone calls that we needed to make. And that's what we did in a very regimented fashion every day of the expedition. This is a photo of Rich doing our scientific measurements. And again, like the rest of the way that we managed ourselves in such a regimented fashion throughout the expedition, we did our scientific measurements meticulously. The driving force behind that was the thoughts of Scott's Terra Nova expedition. We essentially repeated his data set, plus some added extras. And Scott, although he was beaten to the pole by Amundsen, the work that he did in Antarctica still forms the base of Antarctic scientific knowledge to this day. Scott and his team were taking their scientific records right up until the last day when they couldn't even get out of their tent. So we made sure that we were taking our scientific measurements meticulously. And so we were about 400 kilometers away from the coast. Now, we hadn't seen any living thing since the penguins about 3 weeks before. And then this guy turns up. Now this is a snow petrel who is about 400 kilometers off course. And when you're out on your own and you're so isolated, and something like this is really very special. So the snow petrel probably was confused to see us as we were of him. And he just sat in the snow with us, and We gave him some food to eat, and we just hung out for a while, and then he flew off, and we skied in the other direction, and it was nice. But then we didn't see anything else alive for the next 2 months. And so this is our course across Berkner Island. So it's a huge landmass, probably almost about the size of Wales. And then as you come, the red line has stopped now, where you transition from Berkner Island, which is a landmass, to the Ronnie Filchner ice shelf, which is essentially this huge ice shelf that's floating on top of the sea. It's formed by ice coming off the polar plateau, cascading down to the coast, and then fanning out across the sea. And then as the ice comes down and hits the land, it gets crushed up against the land, and it forms these huge crevasses, most of which are covered in snow. So actually coming off the island and onto the ice shelf was actually one of the most dangerous parts of the expedition. And so we were about 3 weeks in by this stage, and 3 weeks is just about the time where you just start thinking about food constantly. And like I said, we were eating 6,000 calories a day just to get enough energy in to help fuel ourselves. By the time we got onto the polar plateau, when temperatures really dropped into the minus 40s, we were probably burning anywhere between 8,000 and 10,000 calories a day. So throughout the expedition, we were probably in a calorie deficit. And this is just a little video about the food.
Every morning and evening, we have to drink 60 mils of olive oil. And it's among probably the most unpleasant things that we do. Not that the olive oil is amazing, but 60 mils is quite a large quantity of olive oil. So this is Rich drinking his evening olive oil.
It's hard to describe how unpleasant drinking olive oil is. I think I have half of this. Gareth's going to have the other half because we have half in the evenings. We're going to have a whole one of these in the mornings each. And the trick is to try and do it without getting olive oil all over our lovely down jackets and stuff, because otherwise by the time we've done this 69 times, whatever it is, we're going to be covered in grossness. Oh, God. Oh, that even had a frozen lump in it. Oh, I don't think I've done half. Oh, I've done half. It's so pleasant. And now, to wash it down, get to eat some freeze-dried avocado. Yeah. Full of vitamins and fat. Really good for you.
Yum.
Also tastes a little bit like sick. Right, your turn, mate.
Now that you've licked the packet.
Yeah, especially for you.
So olive oil and avocado were two critical foods for us because they're very light and they're very calorie dense. Freeze-dried avocado sounds great, right? But in reality, if you took an avocado and mashed it up and left it on your kitchen bench for a week and then ate it, that's kind of what it tastes like. And so again, around about this time, about 3 weeks in, Rich broke his spoon, which we thought it was very funny at the time. But and Rich decided to bring a 10-year-old plastic spoon on a 3-month expedition. It's probably not the best idea. And so, but when we actually thought about it, breaking his spoon is a big deal because I'm not going to share mine with him. And so he had to fix it, and it highlights one of these things where preparation for these expeditions is paramount. Your preparation has to be perfect because once you get out on the ice, that's all you've got. Everything in the contents of your sled, that's all you've got. And so if a critical bit of kit fails, that can be the end of your expedition. No one wants to plan a 3-month, or to plan for 3 years. A huge expedition where you get out on the ice and suddenly you you break one critical bit of kit and that's the end of the trip. That would be a disaster. So in the end, Rich actually got a piece of our spare tent pole and jammed the spoon in the end of it and then taped it up. That was the final fix. But it did mean that every now and then he'd get it stuck in the side of the tent and he'd pour food down himself, and it was an ongoing saga for the whole trip. So as we crossed the Ronnie Filson ice shelf, we were heading to the crux of the journey, really. So this is in the far distance. You can see the Pensacola Mountains, and there's just one point in these mountains where you can penetrate the mountains and get into the interior of Antarctica, and that point is the Wujek Ridge. There had only been maybe 3 or 4 people before us that had taken this route. The most recent had been probably 10 years before. The only real information we could get on the area was some old grainy US Geological Survey maps. And essentially this is our course across the ice sheet. And then the Wujek Ridge comes up the side. You can see these huge mountains. And to put this in perspective, Antarctica is huge. We're still probably about 15 kilometers away now. That wall, the rock wall you can see on the side there, is probably the size of Half Dome in Yosemite. It's a huge, huge mountain. And we are trying to thread a needle, essentially, just up the side of that rock wall. The lighter bits of snow and ice you can see just on the top of the ridge there are crevasses and overhanging seracs. And so we really had a very, very fine area to traverse.
We've just completed the first ascent of the Wujek Ridge. We had to leave 2 sleds behind because it's so steep. Now we've just come back down to get them. Heading back up now. You can see our track up the ridge there. So we're just going to follow that back up. There's some crevassing and things at the top, so we're going to have to be careful when we go back. But you know, hopefully in an hour and a half we'll be back up the top.
So as we reached the top of the ridge, we were crossing a considerable number of crevasses. You can see one here. So these crevasses are huge holes in the ice. They form as the glacier cascades over the mountains, and it just pulls apart. This one's got a snow bridge on it, so you can see the 2 sides of the crevasse here and here. This is covered in snow, and you never know how thick that is. It could be a meter thick, it could be an inch thick. So you have to go very, very carefully across these. So I'm not wearing skis at the moment because the ridge was so steep. We had to change to crampons and take our skis off, which makes crossing the crevasses even more dangerous because you don't have the increased surface area when you're on skis. Much, much safer to cross on skis. So we made it to the top of the Wujek Ridge, which was a huge, huge positive for us.
We have just ascended the Wujek Ridge.
Oh!
It's a big achievement.
Never have to do it again.
Yeah, we never want to do it again.
Oh no, hang on, we've ascended the Wujek Ridge twice.
Yeah. So we've got all our stuff here now. So we're up here. We went down for our second set of sleds, so all the stuff's here. Out in the distance you can see the Ronnie Filson ice shelf, and in the far, far distance the Weddell Sea. And then if we spin around, that's the view we're going to get all the way to the South Pole. And we've got a bit of a slope to go up now. We need to find somewhere to set up camp. We're still on a bit of a hill and there's a few crevasses around, so we're going to go somewhere safe and set up camp for the night. But we're thrilled to be at the top. It's a big achievement for us.
So at this point we were bang on schedule. We were doing really well. We were skiing around about 22 to 25 kilometers a day, which is exactly what we needed to be doing. But from this point, when we got to the top of the ridge, we had to start increasing those distances to 28 to 30 kilometers a day. And what we were hoping was that as you gain elevation, so as we came up here, we probably gained about 1,000 meters. And you hope that with the increase in elevation, the snow will get harder, it'll become more windswept, and it will become easier to pull the sleds. And we were banking on that to be able to increase our daily distances. And this is our path through the mountains to around 84 degrees south. And these are just some slides to show you what the course through the mountains was like. And unfortunately, what we found was that this area during the previous winter had a huge amount of snowfall. And as we made our way through the mountains, instead of these big open scoured ice sheets that we were hoping for, we actually found a huge area of just very, very soft snow. So we weren't able to increase our daily distances. And as we were moving through the mountains, we were slowly getting higher and higher, and just about to break out onto the polar plateau. And so we're about 30 days in. We're coming close to the middle of the expedition, and it's at this time where your body starts to break down. You've been going for a month. You're in a calorie deficit. You're doing a huge amount of endurance every day. It's the times where musculoskeletal injuries start. You start getting issues with your shoulders, hips, knees, ankles. You start getting blisters that won't heal because your immune systems aren't good enough, because they're breaking down, because you're under so much duress. Your blisters will start getting infected. You'll start getting chest infections. All these things around these people that go on long expeditions, this is the time where they start to break down. And it was actually, for Richard and I, it was a time where our experience as doctors really came in and really came to the fore, because we were able to identify these little problems and get on top of them very quickly. Because it's the type of thing, with your body or with your gear, on these expeditions, as soon as something starts to go wrong, as soon as something's not quite right, you have to fix it. Because if you let it go, then it will become a big problem.
What are you doing, matey? I'm making our recovery drinks. So we've literally just got in the tent. And the first thing we're going to do is have our spirulina and strawberry protein recovery drink. So that's
look at that long bag of health. Oh yeah! It looks gross, but it tastes so good. And
Let
it's
me know
full
if you
of
want
everything
more.
we need.
Let me know
Cheers.
if you want more ice in there.
Cheers.
We would really look forward to these drinks, because it was pretty much the only fruity thing we had with us. We were under strict instructions from our manager and dietitian that we had to drink these every day. They're just packed full of really good things, vitamins and minerals and proteins and carbohydrates and all those things that your body really needs in these conditions. Every day we would call our base camp, so we would have a scheduled call to tell them where we were, how we were traveling, how we were feeling. This is actually a photo of me on the phone to a Qantas flight that was currently on its way to the South Pole. They made the first commercial flight ever to cross the South Pole. And it vexed us a little bit that they would get there in about 2 hours and we still had about 8 weeks. But those phone calls, those daily phone calls, were very important. There's a good reason why you can't just send a text message. The people on the end of the phone, it's either a doctor or our base camp manager, they can tell a lot from the sound of your voice and the tone of your voice and how the way that you're describing things. You can be saying one thing, but they'll be hearing something very different. So and it's always nice to hear someone else's voice that isn't Richard's. And so this is us leaving the mountains behind. So this is one of our last views of the mountains before we headed out onto the polar plateau. And so this is our journey out across the plateau from 84 degrees south to 88 degrees south. It's every degree of latitude is 110 kilometers, so that's 440 kilometers. And it's where you gradually get higher and higher. It's all uphill. It's getting much, much colder. So your average temperatures are in the -40s. The headwinds are getting stronger and stronger as the wind just jet streams down from the South Pole. And at 88 degrees south, 84 degrees south, sorry, it's where we hit our first sastrugi. And sastrugi are these huge ice waves. They're carved by very violent winds over the previous Antarctic winter. They change every season. And what we weren't to know was that we would have these sastrugi solidly for the whole 4 degrees of latitude from 84 degrees south to 88 degrees south, which has never been recorded before. It's unprecedented. Normally, around the South Pole, between 87 and 88 degrees south, there's a band of sastrugi that's always there because of the circumpolar winds, and we were expecting that. And normally they're in patches, so you can ski around them. But we had a solid run for 400 kilometers. And it's really... So we knew that we would meet these sastrugi fields, but we had no idea that they would be so bad. The problem is that on the whiteout days where you can't see them, you're at real danger. Some of them can be 3 meters high, and you're at real danger of skiing up one side and falling off the other. And when you've got huge sleds behind you, people on previous expeditions have broken legs and arms and all sorts of things. And the other thing was that we were always quite sure that wherever we were on the polar plateau, we would be able to get rescued. But you can't land a plane in these sastrugi fields. So when we were deep, deep into the sastrugi, we were well beyond safe rescue. And so we were very isolated, and we were starting to move a lot slower than we needed to. When we hit these sastrugi fields, especially on those whiteout days, we were covering maybe 12 or 14 kilometers a day, well below what we needed to make it to the end of our journey. And so it was Christmas. And you can see our little Christmas tree and our little Christmas pudding and a dram of whiskey that we shared. Christmas Day still haunts me. It's the hardest day that I've ever had on any expedition. So we probably traveled about 12 kilometers in 16 hours of constant sastrugi after sastrugi. It's not the big ones, it's the thousands and thousands of tiny ones. You trip over your skis, your sled gets jammed, you can't get any kind of rhythm. And we both got into the tent on Christmas Day and we were utterly mentally and physically shattered. And it was the point where we realized that we were moving too slowly to make it to the Ross Ice Shelf and make it to the end of our journey. And it's a very hard realization to come to when you're in the middle of nowhere. You're thousands and thousands kilometers away from home. You feel this goal you've had since childhood, something you've worked towards for 3 years, just slipping away. Yet you still have to, you can't turn around, you can't give up, no one's coming to get you. You have to just pick yourself up, reorientate, make another plan. So it's at this stage that we decided to make the South Pole the goal for the end of our journey. And all through the whole process, our number one priority was to get home safely to our families. And that's why we made the South Pole the goal for the end of the journey. And so the route from 84 to 88 south. So the polar plateau, once you're up there, it's not a benign environment. So you have these huge winds coming off the South Pole, but you also have hidden crevasse fields. And what you can see in this picture, in the middle of the screen, you can see a very slight dogleg. And what's happening there is there's two ice streams moving past each other. One's moving slightly quicker than another. And what it does is just fractures all the ice. So you'll be in the middle of nowhere. You won't be able to tell any difference by looking at the snow. But there'll be huge holes that you've got to be very, very careful of. So we had to navigate about 20 kilometers of crevasses at that point. So you always have to be aware and on your A game. But it's not all bad. Every now and then, when you're out in these places, you get a glimpse of something incredible. And in Antarctica, you get these incredible parhelions, where the sunlight hits the ice in the atmosphere and forms these huge halos around the sun. And then this is at 88 south, high on the polar plateau, coming up to close to 3,000 meters. And we had approximately 2 degrees to go and about a week to do it in. So now, remember I said that 66, day 66 or day 75 is the critical point. So now we still had a huge distance, almost 200 kilometers to go in the final week. So we were skiing close to 20 hours a day, sleeping very little, having very little time off, because we were literally racing to get that final plane out of Antarctica.
This is our first sign of civilization in 66 days. Tyre tracks, and far in the distance, the Amundsen Scott South Pole Station. Makes me quite emotional. Okay, still got 10 k's to go. This is us arriving at the South Pole.
So you have to approach the South Pole from a certain direction. A lot of the area around the South Pole is a clear air area where the scientists do their research, so you have to follow a road into the South Pole. What you can see, that little black flat thing on the edge of the screen, is the Amundsen Scott South Pole Station. It's an American station where they do all the scientific research. There's various satellites dotted around, satellite dishes, sorry.
So here we are at the South Pole. It's been a hell of a journey, 1,400 kilometers, 66 days. Quite an emotional end to the journey.
It's been by far the hardest thing physically and psychologically we've ever done, and getting here yesterday evening was just amazing. It's an experience of a lifetime, a massive achievement, and it's just great to be here, really.
And it's the end of a long journey, and we're extremely pleased to have finished it here at the South Pole.
Thank you. When we arrived at the South Pole, we had travelled 1,400 kilometres in 66 days. We had made it on the very last day to catch that flight out and get home. On completing this journey, we had joined a very unique group of people. Only a handful of people have actually completed a journey from the coast of Antarctica to the South Pole. We had collected 66 days of critical, unique climate and meteorological data. And it was the longest continuous longitudinal data set since Scott's Terra Nova expedition in 1910, and is currently being published by the Australian Antarctic Programme. What you can see in this photo, this is just a glimpse of of what they've been able to do. So every day we would take a photograph of the horizon on the 4 points of the compass. They could marry the cloud pictures that we took on each day with our position and what they were seeing from satellites above us, marrying that with the temperatures and pressures and wind speeds. They were able to build these huge weather models of this area of Antarctica. And the more we know about Antarctica, the better we will be able to conserve it into the future. We're also very proud to be able to bring along 80,000 young people from across Australia and New Zealand. And on a personal note, if I've learned anything from all these years of dragging heavy things in cold places, it's that real, true growth and inspiration comes through adversity and from challenge. It comes from stepping away from what's safe and familiar and comfortable and stepping into the unknown.
Exploration for me is a deeply personal journey. I think we both feel very privileged to be able to go do these journeys, to visit these areas. We travel to these places because we love spending time in polar regions and in the mountains. To be able to educate and inspire a generation of young people, the scientific element and the conservation element, it's really important to us. It feels to us like we're making our small contribution to the conservation of these areas for future generations.
Thank you.